All right. So on this episode, I want to make it quite clear, and I think I mentioned this last week, that there will be no singing,
Okay.
and the fact that you're barely able to contain yourself in this moment suggests to me that, like Ralph Wiggum, I'm in danger.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because on this episode, Earthlets, we're going to be talking about 2000 AD and music.
That's right. But there's gonna be absolutely no singing, not a lick, not one verse.
Um, so we're going to be talking about how 2000 AD has inspired music in 2000 AD, and various things. So welcome, Earthlets, to the latest episode of In Orbit
In
Every
Orbit
Wednesday.
every Wednesday, where we're going to take you one step beyond.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
Porag Thung, Earthlets, and welcome to the latest episode of In Orbit Every Wednesday. I am your host, Molch-R, and whether we like it or not, this is our other host, KLO-E, and we are bringing you all the latest from the galaxy's greatest comic, beamed direct from the, the nerve center of sub-basement. Let's go with that.
Mhm.
And if you are into Rogue Trooper, make sure you check out the 2000 AD deep dive with my colleague Steve, where he talks to Steve Baxi about Rogue Trooper in some depth.
The
That's
meeting of the Steves.
meeting of the Steves. When every time I go to mention that it's Steve Baxi, I kind of have to check myself that it is that. My brain goes, no, it can't be two Steves. You can't have two Steves on the same episode. But make sure you download the 2000 AD app and subscribe to 2000 AD, and you get it delivered to your device every week. And also, you can get it delivered to your door. Going on to 2000ad.com and subscribe now, Earthlets, and get the galaxy's greatest comic beamed into your eyeballs every 7 days, and also the magazine every month. Hundreds of pages of the best comics. Anyway, we decided that the theme for this episode was going to be 2000 AD and music. Why? I don't know, but I do
Somebody
want to thank.
suggested it. I think it was,
It was
I think
judging
it was
on.
Judge Anon on
Yeah,
Blue Sky who suggested it, and I, like, immediately when I read that, I said, "Yes!"
yeah.
Like,
So
like, we
thanks
have
a
to
lot,
do that one.
mate, for this
Yeah,
one.
you
Um,
threw Molcher into the fire for
well,
this, so
it's
thanks, man.
I, the uncoolest, most musically illiterate person you can imagine, who very very much kind of old man shouting at clouds. I know what I like, and I'll tell you when I hear it. Um, to work out, we discussed what we're going to talk about in this episode. To work out the answer to a question KLO-E is going to ask, I had to open up iTunes, like a caveman, KLO-E, like a cave.
I it this were I saw a TikTok the other week where somebody asked, like, "What music are you into?" And somebody said, 1920s industrial work songs." What? And I was like, that's you, Mike."
I mean, it's even worse than that.
Does it involve a lute?
My my
Like,
wife very kindly got us tickets to go to see a band in Leicester, which is not. I know this is a tiny country and this is like next door to you, but Leicester is not an insubstantial journey away from Oxford.
10 minutes.
Particularly on these roads. And we went there to see Goblin Band, who are like a folk band who do like medieval and early modern
Amazing.
infused music. So it's even worse than that, KLO-E. I like old music.
I was gonna say, like, Goblin, like the people who did the soundtrack for Suspiria?
Very much no.
Oh, see, you could have just said yes and seemed so much cooler, and you took the road
No. But
roadier traveled.
check out Goblin Band. They're very good. Anyway, For those of us who were born even remotely close to the millennium, music, people like popular music, don't they? Oh God!
The children like the pop musics and the rock and roll tunes.
But the reason, oh God, the reason why Judging On suggested this is because the first episode of Nemesis the Warlock, all the way back in 1991, literally took its inspiration from a pop song. And I think, and I'm probably going to be corrected if I'm wrong, the original idea had been to do like each story or each episode would be inspired by a particular song. So because it's one of the wonderful idiosyncratic quirks about Nemesis the Warlock is that you don't actually encounter Nemesis until you're quite a
Yeah,
long
pretty
way
far in.
through the strip. And particularly that first story, inspired by the Jams going underground. And that gives Pat Mills and Kevin Neal this wonderful canvas to kind of play with and what I love about that episode, just dog barking in the background.
No,
Um,
sorry.
what I love about that first episode is that so much of what becomes the core of Nemesis the Warlock is established in that first episode.
Yeah.
And is inspired by the music of the Jam of all things. And you have that wonderful cover by Kev of one of the Terminators with making it look like an album cover, and that's so wonderful. And it's such a difficult trick to pull off as well.
Yeah, I don't know, I think that's so good. Like, you don't get to hear too much, like, unless it's a music comic, like, you don't get a whole lot of comics where it's like, "This is based off of, like, a song, like, we're just gonna riff kind of, like, on the feel of this," and more on that kind of general synesthesia later, but, um, yeah, I think like, using the Jam for Nemesis totally makes sense to me. Like, that
It,
totally tracks.
and there's such an of the moment feel to that story. Still,
Mhm.
all these years later, you get that sense of you know uh, musty record shops and vinyl and just the enemy
Oh,
and it's so evocative,
yeah.
but it's this mad sci-fi story
Mhm.
um that is just absolutely fantastic. But music is one of those things where, and again, thank you to Judging On for suggesting this as a subject.
Yes.
Music is one of the things that has had a complex and often antagonistic relationship with 2000 AD. In that 2000 AD has inspired music,
Mhm.
has been inspired by music, has tried to incorporate music, has incorporated music into
Yes.
various aspects, and that is so much of not just that early first golden age in the early 80s, but also of like the second wave
Yeah.
going through into the 90s of trying to square this circle of two art forms kind of in conversation with one another. And
Oh,
I find that fascinating.
like, I would almost argue that, like, probably the mid-80s through the very interesting period of 2000 AD in the 90s, it is, like, very much, like, linked is very, very much linked with music. Like, I think they go completely hand in hand. Because I mean, you got I mean, honestly, when everybody thinks of music in 2000 AD, one of the first things that they think of is "I Am the Law." Like, they think of Anthrax, um, which hopefully, fingers crossed, we can have Scotty in on this podcast in the future.
Never say never. Never say never.
I would really hope so. Ah, that would be like a bucket list for me. But but yeah, I think a lot of people think of, like, Anthrax. I mean, probably Transvision Vamp, which I don't know if we've talked about that before.
I don't
But
think we have. It's kind of a blind spot, I think, because they're for me, they were like one of the quintessential 80s bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's it? It was Halo Jones hanging out with
Yeah.
Halo
With
Jones,
KLO Jones, yeah.
which again is it's such a shame that like if we tried to play some of the music on this episode, we'd immediately get a takedown notice on
Which is
YouTube. So
such a bummer, 'cause, like, I'd be
yeah.
just hitting my Spotify the whole time. That would be the whole episode.
Do you know what? In the show notes for this episode, we will put links to all the songs that we reference.
I might make a playlist, Mike.
Oh, perfect. Oh, of course. Well,
Yeah.
we have the 2000 AD account on Spotify, which is terrible and all that, but we've got playlists on there for specific issues. So let's do a playlist on the 2000 AD Spotify for
I
this.
am so on it. I'm on it. I was born for this. Because do you wanna know what really wants to go on there? Because this is outside of, like, the obvious choices.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite 2000 AD music came from, Jeff Barrow. Jeff Barrow of Portishead, uh, which I'm already, like, a massive Portishead fan to begin with. So him doing an entire dr rock concept album, ah, mwah, 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 chef kisses everywhere. It's so good.
So, I mean, well, the story behind Rock is that him and Ben Salisbury, and they've done loads of soundtrack work together. What's it called? Thingy 81.
Fill in some
Archive
words.
81. There we go. Sorry, Archive 81, which was a
Mhm.
fantastic kind of horror series that got cancelled after one season on Net. Thank you, Netflix. Um,
Woo.
they did the soundtrack to that, and it's amazing. The thing with Drock is that they had begun conversations with the producers of the Dread movie about them doing the soundtrack,
Oh.
and they went down a specific kind of John Carpenter inspired route,
Mhm.
which is fantastic. And if you're able to listen to Drock, really do recommend it. But Paul Leonard Morgan, who's the guy that they went with, went in a slightly different direction, more kind of 90s action movie. I hope I'm not being rude to him there, but that's how it seemed to me. So you've kind of got these two parallel soundtracks to exactly the same film that
That's
you can kind of I mean, that's like an ultimate, like, Blu-ray extra, isn't it? That
yeah,
you
that like, how is that not a wide thing?
well,
It should be.
I think it's 'cause Drock is Jeff and Ben's own thing. And they did an amazing, they did a live gig, at, Orbital Comics, God rest its soul, in
R.I.P.
London when the album came out, and that was absolutely fantastic. Pretty sure I video part of that. Anyway, but yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of those fantastic things because Dread, in particular, has inspired so many things and been inspired by so many things that it fits relatively seamlessly with them.
Mhm.
So you can do multiple soundtracks and things like that, but it's. I mean, you mentioned Anthrax and I'm the Law,
Yeah.
which everyone always brings up. Why didn't the new
Yeah.
movie have it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 2000 AD has had a long-standing relationship with Anthrax, in terms of they do like merch with Dread
Mhm.
on and everything. Um, but that's one of the ways in which 2000 AD has inspired and been inspired by music, because there's this whole thing about punk. Like when people talk about 2008, they talk about punk,
Yeah.
and absolutely, punk roared up at the same time as 2000 AD, and so it is
Mhm.
natural to assume that 2000 AD was inspired by punk. But something that when you kind of properly delve into the history of 2000 AD, it's kind of a coincidence. They're coming from the same place in that kind of fiery desire to break the status quo. Pat
Mhm.
Mills talks about, it was very much the late 1970s were all about the rage and the anger and the desire for change. But it's not 2000 AD itself is not punk. In fact, it's probably got more to do with like the kind of indie avant-garde kind of musical scene, rather than everybody walking around with a mohawk, you know?
Oh, I don't think it's I think it can be both. I think it kind
Oh
of
yeah,
is
yeah.
both. Because I think the concept when people automatically think of punk, they do think of like the very performative
Yeah.
very performative version of it. And that's not that's that I think that the aesthetic is, but this is a whole different fucking conversation. But the I think that like the aesthetic is a certain aspect of it, but it's born out of the anger and the rage. But I also think that there is a controversial opinion. I think that a lot of like the of what people originally think of as that punk mentality has a lot to do with hope and anger being a driving factor for hope. And I think that a lot of 2000 AD stories resonate in that same vein, where it's like there's a lot to be angry about. There's a lot to rally against. And I think especially Anthrax using Judge Dredd totally makes sense. And I think Scott Ian has done probably thousands of interviews about Dredd being such a monolith of authority and being so larger than life. So it's kind of it is the ultimate authority to rally against. So in that sense, I think that there is very much a punk tie. But I do
Yeah.
kind of get what you mean about like the indie sensibility in terms of maybe the creators and the uh what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like the general drive behind the creation of it in general is less of a punk thing and more of just a like an indie an indie thing. I'm
Yeah,
so good. I'm real
it's
good at words today.
it's the worst thing is when words fail you as people who are paid to write and
Yeah.
use words. When words
Yeah,
fail
right,
you,
real good.
do I have to hand it all back? But for me, the interesting is how the kind of post-punk phase merged into and was reflected within 2008 because Anthrax come along a little bit later with
Mhm.
things like "I Am the Law." But one of my favorite connections to 2000 AD is ZZ Sputnik, the kind of post-punk
Yes.
glammy kind of new wave thing, who got Ron Smith, Ron Smith,
Ron
former
Smith.
Spitfire pilot, to do like an album cover for them because they
God
loved his
bless.
work. And when I interviewed him years ago, he talked about how weird it was in the 80s for him to be. I mean, by that point, he was in his late 50s, early 60s, I think,
Mhm.
and like he was a proper three-piece suit, silver fox type,
Mhm.
um, and
Silver fox, you say?
but for these kind of new wave bands and these punk bands and heavy metal bands to be really into his artwork because it was all, he co-created Chopper,
Yeah.
and that was him drawing on the kind of, the kids dressing like punks in the street and leather jackets and chains and everything. And
Mhm.
so just kind of all feeds into itself. Um, and then we have the Fink Brothers.
Ah, which is just like madness.
Lit, lit, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, both meanings. I love the Fink Brothers. Like that's such it's it's one of those little garbage projects that just makes me impossibly happy. Have you ever seen the video for some of the stuff that they did?
Yeah, yeah.
I went back and rewatched some of it last night and I was like, "Ah, Britain should have sunk into the sea." Like,
I,
what
I'm, I don't think even they would argue it's necessarily a high point in their artistic careers.
what was it when I brought up the Fink Brothers earlier before we started recording, what was it that you said?
Oh, I can't remember. Oh no, am I going to have to cut this bit out?
No, you might have to, but what was it? It's I said, "It's the guys from Madness, isn't it? I'm not making that up." And you said you said, "Yeah, the one that nobody cares about." And
No, 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 no. I think you'll find what I actually said was Sug, and the one whose name people can't remember, and people is me.
and people
You are
is
gonna get me
you.
sued.
Oh my god. Do you wanna know what my favorite music tie-in for 2080 is?
Go on.
Prince inexplicably showing up in Tyranny rags. I remember it was because I only actually found Tyranny rags a couple of years ago, and when I dove into it and I like, just Prince shows up, I was like, "This really is the most magical series of comics in the entire universe. Truly, it's not a lie." Like, there's no reason for any of this to be happening, but it's all
I don't
very good.
I don't know, what the timing of it was, but it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was around the time that he became the artist formerly known as Prince.
Yes.
Because all the way through, he's basically talking in what we now consider to be text speak.
Yeah.
The 2000 AD yet again,
Staying
being
on top of the
uh,
trends.
yeah. But, you know, the kind of, the incorporating of music into strips, the most obvious one is Zenith,
Yes.
who, you know, is an expression of that kind of, vacuous, pop machine, the kind of Aitken and Waterman, Stock Aitken and Waterman kind of
Yeah.
factory process, of soulless pop. Um, and I think out of any creator who's worked on 2080, Grant Morrison probably has done more than anything else to try and incorporate music and comics, particularly in 2000 AD. Um,
And well, Grant has talked so much before too. Like even when I've had a chance to talk to them, it's a like music is just such a big part of their process, their personality and all of these things. And especially during the 90s, like what a period to do that. And honestly, whenever I think of the series 4 of Zenith, I always think of that song "I'm Free" by the Soup Dragons. Do you remember? "I'm free, do what I want." There was gonna be singing on this episode, I told you, and but it's the because that's the series where Zenith, like, tries to pivot and go into his baggy era, and, it just takes me out every single time. Oh, Grant. Grant forever doing trying to meld everything into a big, beautiful goop pile for that makes for great comics.
I mean, Zenith itself is interesting, not just as a kind of time capsule of the music from the transition of the 80s into the 90s, but also as seeing pop music as like the soul of Britain,
Oh,
effectively,
yeah.
and British culture, and because, you know, obviously, um, the notion of teams of groups as
Mhm.
of bands, between superheroes and pop music is, you know, a great observation in the strip. And I I often wonder if, you know, Zenith is a strip that you could do now, and I don't necessarily think that you could in the same way.
Um, I I actually I always kind of hate having that discussion about anything, the, like, "Could you do this now?" And it's like, well,
Yeah.
technically, yes, you absolutely could, but the thing
But would it
is that
work? Would it
the
work?
but the but culture has shifted, like, and it
Mhm.
shifted in such a different way that you could do it now, but it's not gonna look the same.
Yeah, yeah.
It might you might harbor similar results, but it's not going to have that feel that you get. And I mean, that's just what's so great about these little singular things in and of themselves is because no, you probably couldn't make that exact thing in that way that you love it as it was then, how you could now. And that's what makes it so special. That's what makes it good. Oh, actually, speaking of Grant Morrison, was it, Really and Truly? I mean,
Well,
that's all about going to a rave.
I was going to bring that up because that's kind of like a yeah, that kind of post trance beatnik kind
Oh,
of
uh,
psychedelia. I mean, Ryan Hughes very much on board with the whole project, and I think, but it's the early '90s in particular is when I think 2000 AD did start to struggle with its place in culture and specifically
sure.
in relation to music, because as it began to grow up, it's really interesting. Whenever I go into the archive, I always take the time to flick through one of the big kind of bound volumes that we inherited from my PC,
Mhm.
and you go back to the 80s, and when bear in mind at the time, like Roy the Rovers, like Barry Tomlinson got every kind of middle-aged celebrity you could possibly think of into
Yeah.
that thing, like Bruce Forsyth and all this, that, and the other. And 2000 AD had this weird relationship with fame, and it had a lot of famous fans. But whenever it talked about them, I always got this feeling that it was deeply uncool, and that's not. I'm deeply uncool, but like deeply uncool nerds talking
Game
about some
recognized game.
didn't fully kind of like okay. That's I literally can't even think of any. Oh yeah, David Essex. I don't know. That's David Essex is a big 2000 AD fan, but like Human League did a song about Judge
Yeah.
Dredd, which is very different to Anthrax's. But
Uh-huh.
when you've got such disparate kind of you're influencing just such disparate kind of cultural products, it can be hard to talk about it. So I always felt that there was this kind of almost fatherly kind of, well, whatever you kids are into, that's fine. Um,
But that's kinda great, though. Like, that's honestly,
yeah.
that's kinda what you want.
But then
It's
but then when it
the
gets into the 90s, it kind of struggles a little bit because, it very much goes towards the kind of rave and dance culture.
Well, it
So
just
you
became more difficult because everybody was on E the whole time.
I mean, some people were, some people were. Um, but I mean, you started getting things like, cyborgs, like record reviews and things like Really and Truly, and it very much felt, it was on a particular. And again, this is no criticism; it's what people were into, but um, it wasn't necessarily influencing and being influenced by as wide an element of culture as it
Yeah.
had before. As readership declined, as the whole notion of periodicals and comics changed in the 1990s, you see it shift quite radically. But things like Really and Truly are very much such musical projects from the very beginning.
You know what didn't help with that? The Cure, because because I think it was '95, like, Cure put out, there's a song on the album now I can't remember the name of the album off the top of my head. I think it was '95, it was in '95 though, and they came out with a song called Dread Song, spelled like Judge Dredd.
Which was on the soundtrack of the Judge Dredd movie in
Oh,
1995.
yeah, I know, and it has fuck all to do. It's like, "Believe in me as I believe in you," as a repeating lyric throughout for, like, a good 3 minutes, and I was like, "What this feels like a very specific kind of dumb dog whistle. Did you just wanna remind everybody that you were extraordinarily English? Like, what is this? What
The
is
thing is,
this?"
I'm just looking up the soundtrack for the '95 movie, and the majority of it is Alan Silvestri
Yes.
who did all the incidental music. But then you've got The Cure, you've
Yes.
got the Cocteau Twins, you've got
Yeah. Oh,
you've got Left Field and White Zombie, and it's just like, oh my god, like that's a pretty A-list like alternative soundtrack, but on like a relatively harmless anodyne Sylvester Stallone thing. But I guess it was the 90s. Everybody was doing that shit, you know?
No, it's um, because the '90s are making a comeback right now, we're gonna run over time, but we have to, I'm so sorry. But, like, the 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 because, like, the kids are bringing back the '90s, like, the '90s are a trend right now, and but they're bringing back, like, all the worst parts of it, and I keep trying to explain to some younger folks that I know who are in their, like, early 20s, and I'm like, "No, you're picking, like, you're cherry picking the weirdest, like, happiest parts. You forget, like, all of the absolutely rogue, batshit soundtracks. Are collectively forgetting about, like, how terrible and formulaic and camp movies were. Like, comics were all over the place, and everybody had no feet and big shoulders. Like, it's it's all a problem, and I think that the 1995 Dread movie is the perfect amalgamation of all of that, and I mean that lovingly.
I
Mike
mean, go on.
Mike, because I don't wanna run over time too much, but I do have a thing that I have to ask you. So,
Mm,
hmm. So when it you know what synesthesia is, right?
yeah.
So, for anybody who doesn't know, synesthesia is this kind of like phenomenon that can happen with certain people where you can have like two coinciding senses. Like some people can look at color and have an idea of what that color tastes like, or you can read, you can see music, you can, etc., etc. So, at least for me, sometimes, especially when I'm reading comics, something that is, literary, but also very visual, I kind of associate certain music with that. So when I'm reading certain strips, I think of certain bands or certain tracks off of an album or anything like that. So I was wondering what groups you associate with certain strips if you have any. And I'm particularly excited about this question because I think you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Absolutely none whatsoever. And also, as we discussed before this episode started, I am incredibly musically illiterate. Like I can never remember. Like I'll just get a song and I enjoy that one song. I don't know. I don't know.
Like, for instance, okay,
I don't think I do. I don't think I do. I think because um, I read the voices out in my head
okay.
while I'm reading. Um, that there's not really any other space for any more music,
There's no more
any
room
noise
in
in there.
there, man.
It's very quiet in here. Like it's just somebody weeping in a corner consistently. What about you? What about you?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, because when I read comics, I kinda see them like, as a movie, because like, I know
Mm.
what's on the page right in front of me, but I also, like I kinda have my own soundtrack running, and I hear the voice in my head as well when I'm reading it. But, like, for whatever reason, like, when I'm reading Strontium Dog, I hear the Pogues,
Okay.
and I could not tell you why. Like, it just fits for me. And, it's things like that. Ace Trucking, bear with me, I Like to Boogie by T-Rex.
You have very different experiences reading comic books, Chloe.
I really do. Also, and it's your least favorite subject for me to bring up, but my god, we're gonna make it happen. If I ever get a chance to read through Big Dave in a oneer, all I can hear is Vindaloo by Fat Les.
That I can get. Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you can hear that
Oh,
one.
I try to limit my exposure to that song because when it originally came out and was in the charts, back in the days when I used to listen to the radio,
Oh,
uh, I discovered that the beat of that song is roughly the same as when I walk, my footfall when I walk. And so as I would be walking, it would just be playing over and over and over in my head.
where
That was
on
a
earth
really
are you from? Where from?
that was a really awful summer, if I'm perfectly honest with you. We really have run out of time. Tell us your favorite 2000 AD songs or 2000 AD inspired music.
Or your weird synesthesia choices, anything.
Yeah,
But otherwise, I'm actually gonna turn this into a legitimate playlist.
funny enough, I can't remember who it was, whether it was Douglas Walk or David Brothers did
I think it was
a.
Doug. I think it was
Was it
Douglas,
Douglas? Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. They did a soundtrack, a 2000 AD soundtrack, which yeah, we're no doubt going to completely rip off to do do it on us. So check out the link in the episode description for our Spotify playlist for 2000 AD. In the meantime, thank you. I'm not quite sure that's the right phrase to my co-host Chloe for that
Yeah,
fascinating discussion about
that was
music.
ridiculous. Thank you,
Uh,
Judge Anon, for
yes.
bringing this up because this was actually super fun.
Absolutely. And if you have a theme you would like us to explore, you know, put it on Blue Sky,
Yes.
Facebook. We occasionally check Twitter, and or email us at thrillcast@2000ad.com. Thrillcast, all one word, at 2000ad.com. And thank you to everyone who's been in touch with some really lovely things to say about In Orbit every Wednesday. Your tattoos are like catnip, apparently.
Oh, dude. Okay, everybody just take a look because this is the only tattoo tour that anybody's getting. You're gonna have to go to a different site for that.
On that point,
Lord
we
have
should see you in
mercy.
7 days, Earthlets. Do check out the second episode of the Simon Bisley interview, which is coming out this Saturday,
Yay.
which is
It's
just
very
like
special.
another hour of him. Well, basically an hour of him going through the Horn God. We really have gone over time. So we shall see you in 7 days, Earthlet. And until then, splendid Birthrig.
See you next week.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
Well, thanks for joining us on In Orbit every Wednesday, Earthlets. Make sure you like and subscribe and go along to 2000 AD, where you'll be able to subscribe to 2000 AD and the Judge Dredd magazine. Sign up to our newsletter and you'll get hundreds of pages of free comics to download. And download the app for your Apple and Android devices. Now, don't forget, Earthlets, this is the 2000 AD universe. We just live in it.